I just want to start today's episode with a very brief heads up. I talk about in my intro, in my trailer, that I'm the friend that likes to ask the hard questions, which means that sometimes we talk about hard topics. And today's episode has quite a bit of conversation, although it's not the main focus of this episode, but quite a bit of conversation about losing a parent. And my guest, Lizzie, is a decade into her grief journey around losing her mom. And I'm, my gosh, I can't believe 2 decades in. So if you are somebody who maybe has had a more recent loss, the way that we talk about this, in the ups and downs of grief might just seem a little too casual for some. And I just want to give you a heads up, if that's you, that this week's episode, especially the beginning part, may not be something that feels right. And if that's the case, please go take care of yourself and join us next week for another episode.
Hey! All righty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello, and welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander. My friends, they would tell you I like to ask the hard questions. You know who I am in the group. I'm the person that's saying, okay, I'm going to ask this question, but don't feel like you have to answer it. And now I can be that friend for you too. Here we are.
We're here.
We're together.
It's happening.
Everyone, this is Lizzie, my dear friend, Lizzie Braicks.
Hello, everyone.
Braicks-Rinker. I always forget.
Either one's fine.
Lizzie has been in the online space for nearly as long as we've been friends, which is a long time when I tell you the story about how we met.
Well, I was writing a bio for my branding company, and I was trying to think about when I got started with social media, and I was like, oh, it was in college when your husband's friends would have me tweet out the location of their parties. And that's like the beginning of my social media career.
Fun story. Yesterday was Michael and I's 13-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I need to get on Facebook then.
Which is one of these things I talk about where certain people, it hits so different when you were there and you remember it. Like you were there when I met Michael. You remember when we went on our first date. I mean, you weren't on the date, but you remember me freaking out about it.
Might as well been. I heard all about it before and after. Well, and you're the reason that I knew who Dan Rinker, man I'm married to now, is. Like, I heard about him from you.
That's how long we've been a duo. Which brings me to how we met.
Yeah, let's dive right in.
You were a sophomore, I believe.
I was a freshman.
Oh, you were a
You
freshman.
had just transferred to Gonzaga. I want to say maybe that the school year hadn't even started yet, but you transferred, or like the semester maybe hadn't started yet, but you transferred to Gonzaga from University of Washington. You knew a bunch of guys on the rowing team. I did too. And they kept telling me that I would love you, which they were right, which is so funny thinking about those guys being so right about
knowing that. That's fair.
And then I think that the reason that we hung out is they kind of did a friend to set up for us, and we were baking an apple pie in the basement of whatever that dorm was. Dooley, I want to say.
Yep. And I stole a bunch of baking sheets from there, which I still used in my home until maybe a couple years ago. But we were in that basement, and I don't know what exact comment you said, but you made a comment, that was like one of those, only somebody who's gone through it understands what that means. And you made some comment, and I think I just was like, oh, well, my mom died.
Yes.
Which I wouldn't have just thrown out all the time. In fact, the guy we were baking pies with, I think, was
I can still picture his face. So mortified. What have I done?
Why am I here?
I'm stuck in a basement baking a pie.
And you immediately were like, my mom is sick.
Yeah. I was like, my mom has cancer. I can remember it so vividly, like how quickly it came out of my mouth and the look on your face. And I was like, oh my gosh, this person gets it, because I was a freshman. I hadn't been in school for that long. And
your mom was still alive at this point.
my mom was still alive. Yeah. Alex met my mom a bunch of times. My mom sent her care packages or care package, but I hadn't really told anybody at college because, like, it's freshman year. Everyone is so excited. It's such an awkward thing to bring up versus I grew up in a small town and everyone just knew. So I never had to tell people.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that might have been one of the first times that I told anybody in college. And it felt so good. And then the rest is history. That's it. That's the podcast. Thank you.
We're going now. 4 minutes in. Yeah. I really wish I had a video. I wish I could go back and see, because whatever you said, something about your mom just made me realize, like, there is something deeper going on here. And I wouldn't have just dropped that on you. In fact, I don't really know how many guys on the team even, like the guys that were there from my high school that I knew.
There weren't that many of them that were there from high school when you think about it that you knew. It must have been just one of those kind of, like you said, sort of dark things that you say when you're, 18?
Yeah.
That like nobody else gets unless they also are a child who has dealt with a lot of trauma. And I think you just picked up on that.
Yeah. And I just offered it up right away. And that would not have been a good thing with most people, but
we don't lead with that usually.
No, I definitely do not lead with that, especially at 18. But
yeah,
I mean, this goes to sometimes you just take a little bit of a risk. You drop as I call them, big intimacy. And it worked out well because you also wanted to open up about this to someone, but there wasn't a lot of 18-year-olds who had any concept of what was happening in your life.
I had one friend from high school whose dad died when we were, I want to say, in middle school. And like some of my parents' friends had cancer or had died, or I knew people who only had one parent because one had died when they were younger, but I didn't know anyone really close to me. And all of my besties from high school, who are still all of my besties, you guys were all at my wedding, like they, how are they supposed to know how to deal with it? So just nobody knew what to do. And I found college really hard because you and I had such different priorities than everybody else, and like such different focuses. We were at such different points in our lives in some ways that I found it really hard to relate to people. So I was like, I don't care about my grades. I don't know if my mom's going to make it out of the surgery today. Yeah. And I remember you just like filling this hole that I didn't even really realize was there. And it was like the friend that I so desperately needed. And like from the first day could 100% be my entire full vulnerable self with, in a way that was like really, really powerful. Like you've seen me just like throwing up in people's yards. You've seen me just sobbing. You brought up the other day when you picked me up and we just drove around. Like I can think of coming to your house crying and your now husband buying me flowers. Like pretty much from the get-go, you saw really what I was going through, and you still were like, yeah, I'm going to stick around because I know what this is like, where a lot of people were like, whoa, I just want to party.
Well, and I think so my mom died when I was 13. And to me at the time, it was a very sudden death. To the adults around me, they knew. My mom died from alcoholism, from liver failure.
Right.
And the adults knew she wasn't okay, but I didn't really know. So to me, it felt really sudden. You had a very different experience. And to make it through high school, like the short version of this, to make it through high school, I just didn't really process it.
I mean, survival.
Yeah. I kind of started processing it freshman year of college. So when you and I met was actually, even though you were in the middle of it, I also was in the middle of processing my own stuff. So even though the timing seems very different, really we aligned on a lot of things.
I've had this conversation with a lot of people who have lost a parent where like I hear your situation where it felt really, like you didn't know, maybe the adults did, but it was so sudden. And I hear things like that and I'm like, that would be a million times harder.
Well, you and I have debated this. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so funny because like from an outsider's perspective, it just, yeah.
And the processing is never over. So Lizzie last year, 2022, gave a TED Talk on Mother's Day.
The day before Mother's Day. Yeah.
The day before. Ugh. Why do all the big things have to line up with Mother's Day? Graduation was Mother's Day weekend. Terrible.
I know. That was part of how I was like, oh, I graduated 10 years ago on the same weekend that I gave my TED Talk because it was also Mother's Day weekend. And I remember the very beginning of my graduation ceremony, we were like, it's Mother's Day weekend. Everybody stand up and look at your mom.
Yep. They did this to me the year prior.
Yeah. And I was like, I just sat there and I remember, you're not sitting by your friends because you're in alphabetical order.
Yep.
And everyone was either still drunk or so hungover. And I just remember it being such an uncomfortable, like, get me the fuck out of here situation.
Oh, I was hysterically crying in that moment. And the guy sitting next to me was very confused.
Yeah. I was just like shell shocked. I didn't talk. I didn't move. I remember sitting there looking straight ahead. And it was in my head, a very long standing look at your parents spot because everyone's trying to find their parents in the stands. Yeah. And it was really awful. Get why they did it. If you don't have a mom or don't have a good relationship with your mom, that was such an unnecessarily painful thing to add to an already very intense event.
Honestly, we should write into them and give that feedback. But 10 years to the weekend, you gave a TED Talk.
I did.
And I knew you were giving a TED Talk. I didn't know what your full topic was. You weren't really supposed to talk about it. You're supposed to kind of keep it under wraps.
Secret. Yeah. And they want it to be, they being the TED organization, want it to be like a very personal story, like have an emotional arc that relates back to, even if it is your field of work, which mine was, like the personal aspect is what really makes it.
So can you tell us a little bit about your TED Talk?
Yeah. I'll kind of start from the beginning because I think it makes the most sense that way. So in January of 2022, towards the end, I got an email saying I had been nominated anonymously to speak at the TED event that was happening at the University of Washington that May. And when they reached out, they said, we really love how you talk about accessibility and holistic wellness. We would love to see a topic or a pitch on that. So then I was invited to pitch them, and you get like 120 words. It was something really short. And I just said,
whoa.
Yeah. When I was in college, my mom, had cancer and I was an athlete. It was worded much better in my pitch. But I just said, it really made me question. I talked about the norms in my pitch of like wellness and lifestyle and really where they come from and why we're following them, and has led me down this entire career in wellness and fitness and getting all of these certifications just to really figure out how you can help people actually feel good. So my TED Talk it started out with asking people what they think of as health and wellness. And then I told the story of being an athlete in college and being, Alex remembers this, I was like such an insufferable vegan. And I was just all health all the time, would do extra workouts, extra practices. And I felt, I was at my physical peak, but I felt terrible. I was having these panic attacks. I had chronic pain. I had all of this stuff that no one could really figure out. And they kept saying, well, you're really healthy on paper. And I realized that I was healthy, like physically, I was healthy. The definition of health is just the absence of disease. So super healthy, but I didn't have any wellness. And so then we talked about what wellness, holistic wellness specifically, actually means, the theory, the philosophy of it, and why it matters for everybody.
And I cried while watching this TED Talk, and I sat there and thought, why aren't we talking about this more? Which is obviously why this is your entire brand.
Yeah.
And you're doing a TED Talk on it because we do need to talk about it more. But the idea of holistic wellness, I mean, I see it. I'm like, yes, And I think people are kind of starting to tiptoe and talk about it.
Yeah.
But it has eight, I'm not even holding up the right number of fingers.
It's like, that's 5, Alex.
Fine. I graduated from college. It has 8 parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are 8 pillars, correct.
8 pillars. Can you tell us what they are?
Yeah. So holistic wellness is an actual philosophy that someone created. It's based on 8 pillars of wellness, which I think is really interesting because it is such a trend right now to say you're holistic or practicing holistic wellness. And a lot of people view that as just alternative.
Yeah.
Or like homeopathic. But holistic wellness is a balance. Ideally, they're all somewhat balanced: emotional, physical, occupational, social, spiritual, intellectual, environmental, and financial wellness, which when you think about it holistically and understand that that is what holistic wellness means, it makes so much more sense than it just being alternative healing. But it's this idea that, okay, maybe you're exercising and running marathons and eating really healthy, but if everything else in your life, for example, maybe your mom is dying, is falling apart, it doesn't really matter how physically healthy you are. Like, that's not the only thing. But the wellness industrial complex, which is pseudoscience, marketing, trends, it's where all of this stuff kind of like combines and is the force that we think of as modern wellness. It encourages us to just focus on your body, because it's really easy to say, this is what a good body looks like, this is what a bad body looks like. It's very easy to tap into fear. And also it's a lot easier for most people to have a healthy smoothie or do a different workout than to be like, what is my spiritual wellness looking like in this moment?
I mean, it's also easier to, because you touched on this, right? There's 3 parts of which I had never heard of the wellness industrial complex until you talked about it.
It's fascinating.
Right. So it's marketing,
like pseudoscience, capitalism. It's basically where all of these things combine. And so what's driving what we think about as modern wellness, and a lot of this is changing because of social media, especially after the pandemic, but a lot of what we think of as wellness is really things that we've been advertised and not necessarily truth. Yeah. Or like you've seen a social media influencer post about it a ton. It might not actually be something that makes you feel better at all, but you feel like you should be doing it, or that you're somehow missing out by not doing it, instead of listening to your body and your needs and what you really enjoy doing.
I mean, there's a little bit of that like magic pill solution.
Yeah.
Right? If you do this thing, everybody's doing it. That's going to make you feel better, when in reality, the root of the problem could be occupational wellness, right? You're super burnt out without getting that under control. It's so low, like that is so rock bottom that it is capping everything else. It's dragging everything down. You cannot get any better.
And we also very much have this mentality in Western cultures, at least, where it's like, if I just, I'm feeling really stressed out at work, for example, if I just remove sugar and gluten from my diet, then I'll feel less stressed. Then I can go to work. Like, we always think that we are to blame. And we have, as a culture, this fixation on, okay, maybe I need to exercise more. Maybe I need to meditate more. Maybe I need to change my diet. And those things are great. But a lot of times it's like, once I lose 20 pounds, then I'll feel really confident at work. I'm like, well, maybe you don't feel confident at work because it's a really unhealthy working environment. It has nothing to do with your weight.
Yeah. Or maybe you need a mentor and support to figure out how to get through this next stage. Like, there's so many other possibilities of how you can help this area of your life that people aren't even examining, because we're just sold this idea of health being this very narrow wellness.
Yeah, like the trendy diet, the trendy workout, it's different every single year. And when you have hindsight, like, it's so funny to look back at the era when everybody thought celery juice was going to solve all of our problems, or when kale got a rebrand, or coconut oil, the coconut oil phase. You can think of all these things where we were like, cauliflower, like, this is the magic thing, and everybody goes all in. And a lot of times it's not.
Funny story, right? When cauliflower was like, everybody was saying, replace bananas with cauliflower in your smoothies. I'm going to tell you a fun fact, guys. I'm going to be real honest on this podcast.
Tell us.
Cauliflower makes me have to double over in pain. It causes me so much gas and bloating, and I just replace that straight up banana, and I want to cry all day.
No.
You know, like this thing that is just supposed to be, this goes to listen to your body.
Yeah.
People are just doing all sorts of wild things because we're told this is going to fix it.
And that's another big problem with American and Western wellness culture is we look at everybody's bodies as the exact same. We're like, well, this worked really well for me, so it'll absolutely work really well for you.
Yeah.
And we have a really hard time being like, oh, people are different. Everybody has a different metabolism. I hate what I eat in a day videos because they're often posted by people who have what we think of as an ideal body. Yeah. And then people glom onto them of like, okay, I'm going to just eat exactly what Alex Alexander eats and then I'll look exactly like her. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah. Everybody has to do what's right for them.
Yeah.
For their body, but also just their life and their personality and your
needs,
situation, your needs.
Right. Well, and like I can just think of so many miserable things that I've put myself through, other people have put themselves through in the name of it being the hot trend. And it's fun to try that stuff, but it can be really easy to veer into feeling like shit about yourself if you don't like the cool new workout. Or I've talked about in my talk, and you experienced this, I was a really hardcore vegan for 7 years, and I stopped in 2017, which was right around the time that veganism was finally starting to kick up.
Yeah.
I stopped because it wasn't healthy for me. It had turned into orthorexia, which is an eating disorder. But a lot of times when I post about my chronic pain or anxiety or literally anything, someone will say, well, you should try being vegan. It'll solve everything. It changed all this stuff for me. And I'm like, yes, I felt like that in the first 4 years. But for me, there's nothing wrong with the plant-based diet. I eat mostly plant-based, but having the vegan title was so bad for me. And it's taken such a long time to get out of it. And that's another thing. It's like, it really did not work well for me. I felt horrible. My chronic pain was the worst it's ever been. Towards the end of my veganism, you know, the first couple of years were great, but everybody right now is super into it and I just can't do it. I know that it's a toxic road for myself.
The next time somebody tells you to try vegan, you should just send it over to me. I'll be like, hi, I'd like to report on Lizzie's vegan era.
Yeah, let me tell you.
The experience. Because the thing is, right, you listed off the 8 and certain ones just get prioritized over others. And we're not, again, thinking about all of them. And this concept isn't super mainstream. So I would say social wellness falls low. Very
100%. I think also just the idea of social wellness, like what's your social life like right now? Do you feel like it's healthy or not? Is not something that we really think about. It's like, I think of so many people who talk about going to things that they don't want to go to with their friends from a long time ago that they have nothing in common with. And it just makes them miserable. And it's like, that is part of your wellness. Do you not see how this is impacting everything else? But it's hard.
But then we talk about physical wellness, financial wellness, I think is another great one to compare, right?
Yes.
We get so focused on this one area of wellness that we aren't thinking about the balance of it all. So financial people, some people listen, it's like save, invest, 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 invest. Yes, invest. But sometimes maybe we need to come up with an amount of money that you feel comfortable spending to go do things with friends instead of turning it down and waking up 10 years later and realizing you've turned down every invite your friends have tried to give you. You've missed out on all these memories and maybe you have the friends or maybe you've lost them. Like we get so hyper focused on the ones that we see with no balance of the others.
Yes. Yeah. You're totally right.
Same with eating.
Yeah.
If you are eating in a certain way and you're so hyper focused on that, you're maybe turning down invites to go to things because there are no vegan options.
Yes, to your point, we prioritize this physical thing over all of this other stuff. And I love what you said about save, 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 invest, 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 because it comes back to why I think holistic wellness is so amazing, because financial wellness for me might look very different than financial wellness for you, but maybe all of the other pillars look the exact same. So it's like holistic wellness really empowers us to meet ourselves where we're at and be like, what does this look like for me? Because yeah, maybe your values aren't saving up a ton of money so that when you're 60, you can go do a bunch of stuff. Maybe your values are, yeah, I want to hang out with friends right now, but I don't really care as much about, working out or whatever it is. But I think that's something that we often don't acknowledge, is like, this person might just have different values of finance or different versions of what emotional wellness looks like, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong.
No, yeah, it's not. Everybody's going to have their own version. But I commonly think that social wellness isn't even put on the priority list.
No, I don't think people even consider it.
The thing is, I don't know why anybody would put social wellness on the priority list for a few reasons. I get why people leave it off. I get why it's ignored.
Yeah.
Because when we're young, when we're kids and teens and in college, friends are really encouraged. Like, go hang out with your friends. Oh, I totally get that. Go hang out with your friends. This is the time of your life for your friends. Then you hit a certain age and the priorities shift, right? It's like, well, are you saving? Why would you do that trip with your friends? You should be putting that money away.
Or you should go on that nice trip with your partner, not a friend. This is like a honeymoon.
Yeah. You got to find a romantic partner. You need that job. You got to look a certain way. Certain things then become the priority.
Yeah.
And when you're younger, when you make friends, you often make them with, I call them like friends of proximity. So people that are around you, they're in school, they're in your classes in college,
Yes.
they live with you. So you're really never learning habits or skills for how to make and maintain friendship.
Yeah. Or even sometimes like the type of friends you might actually want. Like maybe you haven't thought of that because you just like, these are the people that are here.
Exactly. And you just make friends with the people that are there. When in fact, adult friendships can be so great because you can actually think about the types of people who have similar interests, who have things you want to also try, things you want to try,
right?
Who are going after similar goals, who challenge you, who have different life experiences. Like, you can pick.
Yeah.
And nobody's spending time to do that. Nobody's thought of that. So why would you prioritize this thing that you have no language for, no habits and skills for? Society tells you it's not a priority. Like, why? Why would you prioritize it?
Yeah. And we're often taught, I think, as women, whether it's intentional or more subconsciously too, that like you can't stop hanging out with somebody, or you can't fight with a friend, or you can't say, hey, I don't want to hang, I feel like we aren't really empowered or taught to speak up for ourselves. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, is this just growing up without a mom and not having someone say, hey, you don't have to do that? Or is this just also part of culture? Because I don't think that we're really empowered to have hard conversations with our friends. It's like, you had a hard conversation, you're mad at them.
Yep.
Not like, I respect you and love you so much, I'm doing this for the sake of our relationship. I think we just really aren't encouraged to have meaningful, deep, raw relationships often.
Well, when you think of social wellness, right, when you get to that romantic partnership, nuclear family stage, you're supposed to, quote unquote, per culture, find this one person, put all of your social wellness on them. Maybe a little bit still falls on your family of origin, like the people that raised you, your siblings. And if you choose to have kids, that person, and they are supposed to provide all your social wellness,
tick all your boxes,
and the rest is just extra.
Yeah. I think too, this is something before we were recording, Alex and I were talking about. We met our husbands in college, And because of that, you are just still hanging out with so many of your own friends and know how to hang out with their friends. You know, like you and I know our husband's friends so well because we all went to college together. But I find I have a little bit of an easier time breaking away from him than some of my other married friends do who met their spouses later in life, just because they haven't really been forced to experience that. And you know, in college, if you're hanging out with your girlfriend all the time or your boyfriend all the time, you're going to hear about it from your friends and in your early 20s. So I think that in that way, we're able to avoid it a little bit. But I do see that happening with myself sometimes where I'm like, why am I expecting him to want to go to Pilates with me?
So I call that the easy invite.
Yeah.
This happened, I don't even know, maybe 6 months ago. We were sitting around on a Sunday and I looked at Michael and I was like, do you want to go shopping today? And he was like, absolutely not.
Cool. Call me next time. I would
Yeah,
love
no.
to go shopping.
Great. We will go next time. But I was thinking about why I did that, right? And it's just because we're together all the time. We're together all the time. He already does things he doesn't want to do for me to make me happy.
Right. And there are some things that are like, this is really fun and I know you don't like it, but I just want you to come with me because like that is the perfect day for me.
Yeah.
But not all the time.
How often are we forcing our partners to do that and really putting that weight, and then we're trying to repay it? So now we're spending all this time, just this back and forth of I owe you, doing all these things I don't want to do, when you could go do that stuff with somebody who actually would enjoy it. And instead of spending the whole time being like, oh, sorry, only one more place, only 10 more minutes, like apologizing, the time could actually be fulfilling.
Totally. Yeah, it could actually be good, fun time for you.
Yes, instead of feeling like a burden.
Yeah, and I do feel like there is, I find too, sometimes like I'll feel guilty, and it's not that Dan puts this on me at all. He's always like, go, go. But you're like, oh, I'm going to hang out with someone else. I'm leaving him at home and he doesn't care. But it's this weird, like, oh, you're supposed to be with your husband thing that sometimes still gets into the back of my mind, even though neither of us believe that.
Yeah, I get that sometimes. If it's been too often, if I'm doing a lot and I'm leaving him at home a lot, I mean, I think at a certain point he'll be like, oh, okay, can we have a night together? What do you want to do? But I do think we appreciate that more. And then we aren't just maybe like watching a show. We're actually hanging out and playing a game or going on a walk or going to do something we both actually enjoy. We enjoy the time a lot more.
Yeah. And this is why I think hobbies are so important, and having your own interests, because that's where I think for a lot of us, it can feel easier to step out. Like Dan is really into golf. I am not. So he's like, I'm going to go golfing with my golf friends.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, cool. And then I'll go to yoga or Pilates with my fitness friends because that's something that I really enjoy. But I think that that can be hard to get to, even of being like, this is my thing that I do for myself with my own friends or by myself.
Yeah.
Like it's really important to have your own hobbies and interests, which sounds obvious, but it's also easy to be like, I love this person and we do every single thing together.
But doing this is taking responsibility for your own social wellness.
Yeah.
Instead of just mindlessly moving through these relationships and waking up 10 years from now feeling rock bottom. It's these little intentional choices that are adding up to create whatever social wellness feels right to you and me and people.
Yeah. And it feels really different for everybody. We were talking about this before recording too. Like, I think some people don't think about how your social wellness is always going to look different too. Like maybe it's seasonal. I know during the summer, I'm like, let's go out, let's do all of the things because Seattle is amazing in the summer. I don't feel like that during the winter. Like my needs socially during the winter are very different, but I think that we'll be like, oh, in the summer, I would do all these great things with my friends. So now I need to keep doing that or that's bad. And it's like, maybe you're having a more social month. Maybe you're having a quieter month. Those things are okay. It doesn't have to be linear. But I think a lot of really being able to embody holistic wellness and all of these different pillars is taking your power back. Like you said, socially, wellness wise, like, do I actually think this makes me feel good or no? And like really getting honest with what do I need? What makes me feel good with a friend, with work.
And I think it's all connected. So I talk about this concept, right, of if you want to find friends, make new friends, getting specific about what you want to do with them. What do you want to talk about with them?
Yes.
And I think it can overlap, right? So if you have financial goals, maybe you want to meet some friends who are trying to do similar things, who are also learning about investing, who want to travel in a certain way.
Yeah.
And it overlaps. And that's the whole, you can be intentional about the people you bring into your life instead of just wandering around. I get why it would be so frustrating if you feel like your social wellness tank is at the bottom.
Yeah.
You feel like you're at rock bottom and you haven't learned any of these skills, haven't ever considered this. No one's talking about it.
Don't really know what you want or need.
Don't know what you want and need. And you just are like, cool, 2023 goal, make friends.
Right. What is that? Like when people say get healthy, what does that mean?
And then you walk out into the world and you are bombarded by people walking past you. And you're just like, well, are they my friend? Should they be my friend? What if I missed my friend? Oh my God. You don't know what you're looking for. Versus if you decide you want to make some friends who are also on a similar financial journey or, you know, like a fun and play journey. They want to travel more. They want to try tennis. They want to walk. They want to do a walking club. I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you can walk through your days saying to people, I'm really looking to get a group together that walks every week. Does anybody in the office want to walk at lunch? Does anybody here, you know, you're maybe at a party and someone's talking about how they travel all the time and you start talking to them about travel and maybe you guys take a day trip together, you know. You actually can hear and see around you what you want. It makes it so much easier to filter what you're bringing in.
Right. I love how you talk about this all the time of like, this is my friend for this. This is my friend for these other things. And I think when we're younger, there's this pressure to like, every friend needs to be equal. You have to have kind of the same relationship with all of them, or you're not being a quote unquote good friend. And it's like, I don't text all my friends all the time. Some of my friends like you, I can hop on a phone call with. I have other friends I've never talked to on the phone, but it's, I think, really hard to get there and to stop trying to force people into what you want them to be.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you said earlier, everybody's body's different. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
They're different. Their interests are different. Their current priorities are different. The availability they have to provide you support is different. The ways they can support you best are different.
Yeah.
Nobody's thinking about that. And then we're asking these very small, I mean, nothing makes me more mad than like, all we need is a couple people. Okay, let's think about this. If I have you and Michael and that's it.
That's nothing. We'd all get so sick of each other.
And that's a lot of things that really maybe aren't your strength or your interest that I'm calling you about all the time, asking you to support me. And you're like, I don't know how. And that's a lot of pressure. So there's this whole like all or nothing with friendship. It's just doing everybody a disservice.
Right. And I think like you and I are a great example of this. Like I used to sleep at Alex's house all the time, like throughout college. Just call, you would just come pick me up all the time and we would hang out. But like we didn't continue doing that in our early 20s because we were working and we had things to do. And I know for me, because I wasn't mature enough, I was like, oh my gosh, are we not friends anymore? And then it was like, no, we have lives, we have schedules, you know, but I have those, oh my gosh, this isn't exactly how it used to be. Does this mean they don't like me? Is this bad? And it's like, no, your relationship with people can and should evolve. But I think that can be a really hard thing too. Like when someone becomes a parent, it can be really hard for friendships because they're like, I don't see this person as much anymore. And it's like, well, you're also expecting them to fit into the exact same spaces that they used to.
One, I also had those thoughts.
Right. Because it's just like, it's hard. Yeah.
I also didn't understand how our friendship was changing. Now that I've spent a million hours thinking about this stuff, I actually have language and terms I could use to describe what happened to us.
Right.
Those aren't mainstream. So people don't even have a way to describe it. And I think when you have some understanding of what's going on, it's a lot easier to process all the change. It's not going to necessarily make it easier, but a little bit because it's going to be less confusing.
Yeah, you just understand what's happening. It's like you're learning a new language or you're being able to see a new color. It's like before it would be so confusing with friendships. What's happening? Why did this happen? You wouldn't know how to talk to them about it. And we'll continue learning about this as we get older. But it's a hard time in your 20s because you're like, I don't have any friends and also I do. Like, how do you meet friends as an adult? That's so hard. And then you're like, I'm not seeing my friends from college or from high school or whatever as much. What's happening? It's an overwhelming time.
And then that college, high school friendship is really seen as kind of like the pinnacle.
The best, yeah.
The best. And so it's so much harder to go out and push yourself to make friends as an adult.
Right.
When you feel like you have to hit this peak or pinnacle, like that feels so far away, so unattainable. So why would you even try?
Right.
Everything is lesser than, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring this up because this is something that I've actually had a lot of really weird feelings about for a long time until recently. But like you and Dan and his friends and teammates are like the only people I talk to from college. But I used to feel really bad about that I wasn't like besties with all my college friends and I would see them all going on trips and I would feel like sad, but also I wouldn't want to go on the trip that they went on. Yeah. And I, a couple years ago, had this reckoning with myself of it's okay that I'm not besties with everybody in college. You know, not every single person is. And also, you and I were going through some shit in college. So like I was not, very few people with the exception of like you and Dan really got to see who I actually was. So like, of course, I'm not really close to a lot of people from college because I was just in survival mode. But for the longest time, I would feel so bad about not having this like super tight knit group of college friends. But as you know, I have a super tight knit group of, they're not even my high school friends. They're like my fucking kindergarten friends. So, but that was really hard for me. I felt like there was something wrong with me because everybody's so close with their college buds.
You know, this is interesting because I've been thinking a lot about this concept of, right, we're told to like put our best foot forward. We want everyone to like us. So what we do is when we want to make new friends, especially as an adult, we kind of show up the way we should, quote unquote,
yes.
Or we observe that person a little bit and decide on the type of person they'd want to be friends with. And then we try and be that person, which is kind of a fake version.
Mm-hmm.
And then down the line, when we start to be ourselves, we might get mad
right
that they don't like us. What we're doing, right, is trying to control that person's reaction.
Yeah.
Which is not very kind to ourselves and to them. And then we get mad down the line when they don't like us and we're disheartened. So that's hard. Like it's hard work to try and watch this person, figure out what they want, change ourselves. It's all hard. But you have to pick your own version of hard. So if you have to pick your own version of hard, shouldn't you just show up as who you are? A lot kinder.
Yeah, a lot kinder, a lot more compassionate. You'll enjoy it a lot more. I'm reading this incredible book right now called The Worthy Project that I highly recommend to everybody. But she talks about this concept of like your ideal self versus your true self. Mm-hmm. And where we run into a lot of this discomfort is like maybe you have this dream of being a really social person who goes out to lunch all the time or whatever. Your true self, like right now, that's not who you are, but you're trying to show up as your ideal self. And so then there's all of this like friction and frustration because you're not, to your point, showing up as your true self and really honoring and nurturing her. Instead, you're like trying to fit yourself into this box that maybe you can get to one day, but you can't just like start being that person. You have to work up towards it. But that's not really something that we're taught.
I mean, it's definitely not something we're taught. And I would say, honestly, we're taught, again, what I feel like is that friendship and community has these extremes, like these all or nothings. There's not much middle ground, which is what I try and talk about, obviously. If you didn't know that, welcome.
Yeah, surprise.
But it is so interesting because what we're told, right, is you're either this social person that I want to say like people are kind of jealous of.
Yeah, like, oh, they're really social. They're really outgoing.
Right? You watch people on social media, you make these assumptions about their friendships. I have people when I talk about my friendships, and friends will tell me that they get this too. People are like, that's fake. Actually, fun fact, somebody told me the other day when I posted a TikTok, this sounds like a cult.
What?
Because this like positive extreme is torn apart. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So it's unattainable. So then the other option is just go it alone. If you want to become this ideal version of yourself, you have to do that all on your own. It's lonely at the top.
Yeah. It's lonely at the top. And also, like I talked about in my TED Talk, the hustle culture, everything tells us like you have to do this all by yourself forever. You have to keep doing it. You can't ask for help. That's a sign of weakness. And you have to just figure it out. Fake it till you make it, which that's good advice in some settings, not every situation. Something else I think a lot about with all of this, like the all holistic wellness and specifically friendships, is we've all been trained to be so polite over anything else. Like if someone extends an invite, you don't want to say no. It's like, oh, that was so nice that they invited me. I need to go. And we think that we're being bad if we're being honest. And it's like, if being polite is making you miserable, it's not worth it. And it's also really not polite. Like you're kind of being mean to the other person by telling them you want to do something that you really don't. But I think we've just been taught as women, especially, to be so like, go along with this, don't rock the boat, be polite. And we get ourselves stuck in these situations that don't feel very good sometimes.
So many things to say. I mean, one is I talk about this idea all the time of like the third option. We don't spend the time to actually think about it. We're not being intentional. We're just going with it, right? So you get the invite, you feel like you should go, you should be polite, or you say no, you feel guilty. You know, a third option could be, hey, that party, it's after a long day. I'm going to be really overwhelmed. That's the honest truth. But I would love to see you.
Yes.
Can we go for a walk? Another one we were talking about earlier is you get invited to like dinner and a show. You don't want to go to the show. You're not interested in the show. So instead of just saying no, saying, hey, I really want to see you all. I'd love to come to dinner, but I'm not going to go with you to the show.
Right.
Like what could you offer if you do want to connect? Now, if you don't want to connect, just say you're not going to make it and move on. But if you do, we feel so boxed into this like yes or no.
Right.
Versus trying to find another option that actually is going to work for you.
Yeah, it's all or nothing. And I love the idea of the third option because, yeah, maybe your friend's inviting you to something that doesn't work for your schedule or something that you just genuinely don't want to do, and saying no, but what if we did this instead? Just makes everybody feel so much better.
I mean, like I said, it's one thing if you aren't interested in connecting. If it's too much right now, whatever, that's fine. Just say no. But a lot of times I think people either say yes because they feel like this is their only opportunity to see their friends. So like, oh, I do want to see them, but I don't really want to do this thing. And then they are frustrated the entire time, or they just say no. And then, right, there's FOMO and
right. I'm being a bad friend.
being a bad friend when you're not. You're not. There's a lot of facets here.
I think about this thing a lot, and I'm sure you will too, because you worked in the wedding industry for so long, but bachelorette parties and being a bridesmaid.
Yep.
Like I can think of so many situations in which my friends or someone I know has gone to a bachelorette party and been so resentful because they spent so much money. They were, going and doing all these things that they don't want to do, but like we don't feel as if we can say no to those things or no to being someone's bridesmaid. And I think it's becoming a lot more common now. And weddings have changed a lot, but it's this huge part of friend culture in the US with our wedding. But
Oh, yeah.
it can get so intense. And like, you, Kaylee, and myself all got married the same year. There was just some stuff that I couldn't go to because like I genuinely couldn't be in the same place. But it was hard. You guys got it, but like other friends would not have.
It's all a balancing act. It's all individual to everybody. Nobody gives bachelorette parties, showers, all these things like a third option.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I will say yes to an invite that maybe on first reaction, I'm like, I don't really want to do that.
Right.
Because I do want to show up for the friend, or parts of it I actually am excited about, but maybe I'll have a conversation of like, I don't really want to go out that one night.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home after that, right? So kind of having those more whatever conversations. But when I do go to those events, or really any event or any whatever, I try and spend a few minutes thinking about what will make this worth my time.
Love that.
What will I leave this social gathering and feel like it was positive? So if you're going to something out of obligation, before you go inside, just spend a minute thinking, is there someone here I haven't seen in a really long time? And if I prioritize even a 10-minute conversation with them, that made this worth it.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't really see them any other way. Right? We're being more intentional about our social wellness. Sure, were there parts of sitting there for this party you didn't love? Yeah. But you can leave and be like, you know what? I never see that person. I'm so happy I spent 30 minutes of this connecting with them. And that makes this feel like it's impacting my social wellness.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point too of when I say listen to your body or listen to what you need. A lot of times, if people aren't familiar with the concept, they are like, oh, just be like comfortable all the time. Don't do things you don't want to do. And it's like true wellness is making yourself do things that you're like, this is hard. I know I'll like it later. I'll be glad later, or this was good for me. And so, yeah, it might be being like, I don't super want to go, but I know I will be glad, or I'm feeling anxious about reaching out to this person, but I know we need to have a sit down conversation. We always have, a great time when we see each other. And like with exercise, maybe your physical wellness is removing exercise and having a healthier relationship with it, but also it might mean like pushing yourself and doing some things that are really hard because of the results you want. Like it's not always all comfort. Part of true holistic wellness in all of these ways is also doing things that make you grow, that are good for you in the long run.
Yes. And especially when an area is rock bottom. So if you've neglected social wellness, then the initial putting yourself out there is going to be similar to deciding, you want to run a marathon and you haven't gone running in a long time. Like those first few times you put yourself out there are going to be very uncomfortable. You don't have a good foundation in this area anymore. You have to build that. And if you give up on those first few training runs,
it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. But, eventually you get more comfortable. You have made connections. You have people, what you can do, how you spend time together, how you connect. It becomes easier to work into your life.
Totally. Yeah, it's that idea of that, like, be honest with yourself. Who is your true self versus your ideal self? Because, yeah, if your ideal self is a marathon runner, that's amazing. But a lot of times people make the mistake of saying, I want to be a runner. I want to be someone who runs 5 days a week. So I'm going to start running 5 days a week right now, even though I haven't run at all, or I only run 1 day a week right now. And then that's where people get so frustrated, or I want to be this person who's really social. I've been depressed for the last year, right? Like we get so frustrated with ourselves because we see where we are versus where we want to be. And we just like try to jump to where we want to be in any of these situations. Like it happens in wellness diets or crash diets all the time, workout routines all the time. People just go way too hard and then they are just done.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to, baby steps and be realistic.
What is your vision of social
right? Like, do
wellness?
you want to go out 2 times a week? Do you want to go out for dinner with a friend once a week? Or does that sound miserable? Like really thinking, am I doing this because it feels good and it's how I want to feel, or because I feel like I should be doing it, which is hard.
I think that part of the reason I'm so interesting to people is because I'm probably like the elite athlete version of social wellness,
Yeah.
I'm so extreme, but I'm not doing that. Like that is truly who I am.
100%. You've always been like this.
I was talking to Sheena earlier today and she's like, the thing about you is you didn't just start this platform. You've been literally living your life this way for as long as I know you. Michael and I sit down monthly, look through the people we want to connect with. Like this is a part of our relationship. I would do this without him.
Yeah, you guys have always been the entertainers. Always, always.
This is just who we are. Now, I don't think I am some peak. I think that sure, some other people may want a similar version to what I have, but most people are going to want half. One quarter.
But you're so honest about what you want and you're unapologetic about it. And that is so wild for people. Like, it's scary.
And that's actually a big reason I don't plaster my friendships as some poster
I
of
love
what they
that.
should be all over my social media, because when I post things, I want people to see snippets that they might see in their own life and then try and find that. I am not the ideal.
Right.
I am very much not the ideal for most people. I'm very extroverted. This is a very high priority in my life. Other people, their quote unquote peak or best or fulfilling version of social wellness is going to look night and day different.
Right.
And that's what it should be.
Yeah.
Just like I never want to run a marathon. I'm never going to be
like,
that
that sounds
person.
amazing.
Like my physical wellness, that is never going to be my peak. So
Yeah.
why would I train for a marathon? But I would maybe run a 5K.
But like your version of this, and this is the whole point, feels so good for you.
Yes.
And that's what matters. That's what's so hard for people to, and again, I'll go back to, I really think that it's really hard for women. I know guys in friendships is a whole nother ball game, but
yeah, lots of that coming.
yeah,
Yep.
there's so much to talk about there. But I think it's just so hard to realize that you are allowed to say what you want and to claim it and to say no to things. And that's what makes you feel really good. Like you're setting boundaries with yourself and with all of these other things. It's like they always say fences make the best neighbors, right? Boundaries make the best friendships, but people just don't realize that they have the option to be like, I'm going to opt out of this.
So I like to think of boundaries as bridges.
Love that.
Boundaries are like the ways that you say yes. So if you can figure out the ways you say no, it makes it easier to see the yeses with your friends.
You're showing people how you want to be treated.
You show people how you want to be connected to them, what you want to do with them, what you'll accept and won't accept from them. And then it's easier to connect.
Love that.
Because there's certain ways.
They know you're communicating your needs with them. They know what you want, and it makes it so much less stressful. But I think that maybe it's being in her 30s, maybe, I don't know. I feel like millennial women are having this very strong reckoning right now with like, I'm allowed to say what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I am allowed to have a say in this. I'm allowed to decide. And it's scary, but I think that's why people see you and are so like, whoa, because you are so yourself. You've figured out what works for you. You are really disciplined about it too, because that's a thing is a lot of people know what works for them, but they don't actually enact it.
Yeah.
And you're also like very honest. You share the hard, shitty stuff. You're not just like, I'm amazing and I have these huge things with friends all the time. You're like, I do this because
I do this
X,
because
Y, Z.
Sometimes it's a lot of work and sometimes it's overwhelming. There's things I don't do anymore. Like it's always changing.
Well, and also like you do this because you do not spend a lot of time, at least not right now, with your family of origin, right? Like Dan's family hangs out all the time. So like for one of his family members, spending as much time as you do with your friends would be like, how the hell am I going to fill this in?
Oh, yeah.
And like probably not as appealing, but for you, it makes sense in your life.
Which is why I think we need to include family and community in our, like my Your People framework has family and community organizations, formal community in it, because you might get support, for example, if your mom dies, from a support group, from a formal community and not from a friend. It might be from your family. There are so many places you can get it, but seeing all of those as options, I don't think most people see those as options, and then balancing it with whatever it is. And you're right, I have more time because I'm not trying to balance family of origin in, so I can invest that in more friendships. And that's just my scenario because everyone has a different picture.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day of a therapist talking about all of these people post-pandemic who like 2020 Christmas were like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. I can't be with my family. And then maybe they had that 2021 also. And then 2022, they were like, I really don't want to go to this. And the therapist was like, you don't have to.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to keep putting yourself through all of these things. Do a friend's giving or like a friend's Christmas or whatever. But that's another thing that we don't realize, that we have an option to opt in or out of, or to change our dynamic. Like, I won't share too much in this because it's personal, but as like Alex knows, I've really been changing in the last couple of years my dynamic with my parents and my brother. And it's like very, very different, but it was really, really hard for a couple of years because we're all used to the same roles that we had and we just were outgrowing them.
It could be only friends. It could be inviting friends to spend time with your family. Maybe that would alleviate some of the pressure. It could be meeting up with family for brunch and then really spending what you would normally consider as like your full Christmas night with friends. Like, there are 9 million
saying
options.
What time you're going to leave. I can only stay till X time.
Options. And it doesn't have to be you are alone or you're with your family of origin. There are so many other varieties out there, and just building whatever feels right. We're using the holidays, but that can work for anything.
Yeah. For Christmas this year, one of my really good friends almost couldn't get home to see her family. And so she was going to stay with us and come and have dinner with my parents. And it ended up that she was last minute able to get home. But when I went over to my parents' house on Christmas, and when I say parents, I mean my dad and my stepmom, just in case you guys are like, wait, her mom died. She's talking about her dad on a ghost. But they were so excited. They were like, oh, like, bring her over for dinner another time now. Cause like, we got so excited about this idea of like having one of your friends over and getting to know her better. And I was so shocked because it was so outside of my family, never has like friends and stuff come, but they were so excited about it. Yeah. And I was like, why have I not done this sooner? Or one year, Dan and I, it just worked out with Thanksgiving that we hosted both of our parents.
Yep.
And it was like the most fun I think either of our parents have ever had. Like, we were hosting, they didn't have to do the stuff. They got to hang out. It's usually just you sitting with your parents. Like, what are we going to talk about? And we changed it and it was great. And then also when you combine both sides of your family, then you don't have to do another day.
Yep. You don't have to stress about how to fit it all in. Yeah.
Yeah. But those are like, it's so hard to change that. And I think it's a really hard part of becoming an adult and becoming your own person, is how you navigate family traditions and asserting what you want and just changing your family dynamic.
Yep. And figuring out where the best support comes from. I mean, we have been chatting for a very long time, so we should wrap this up. But my kind of baseline is that the ultimate self-care is building yourself a support system.
Mm-hmm.
That so many areas of our life are impacted by the people around us, what they tell us is possible and not possible, the way they treat us, whether we're going to people who aren't the right people for certain kinds of support and then we're disappointed. Like, really taking the time to think about this. I think social wellness is such a foundation for the other pieces, and we're not paying attention to it. And I get why. And I had not thought, I had thought about this, but in other terms. But you said something to me months and months ago. And it was just that, when we talk about self-care, we are taught that self-care is something you do alone, right? We're successful if we can do it all on our own, that if we're hurting, we should go home, spend time in the quiet, be by ourselves, read a book, take a bath, light a candle. But that so much of that comes from the fact that if we tell people the only way that they can successfully self-care, they are looking for outside things, so then they buy stuff.
Yeah, it's so purchase-based. Like, you have to get this thing to feel good.
And it's generally free. People.
Hanging out with
Community.
friends.
Asking somebody for a favor in a way that they like to show up for you instead of hiring a service.
Right. Well, and also self-care is another one of those things that's very trendy right now, the last few years, but self-care looks very different for everybody. And for a lot of people, it has nothing to do with, like, there's a difference between self-care and self-maintenance. Self-maintenance is like washing your hair. Like, we have tried to turn these very basic human hygiene things into like, it's self-care. But your self-care might not have anything to do with like face lotion or your body at all. Self-care for you could be going to a bookstore. Self-care could be going and playing with your dogs, right? It's not always wellness-y.
Getting your finances in order so you're not stressed anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-care isn't always just like the bubble baths and that type of stuff. But again, the wellness industry really makes it feel like something you need to do by yourself. You need to figure it out and that it has to look a certain way.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to close on that. Just, I firmly believe so much of self-care is having the person to call in the bad moments or in the good moments or when you want to have fun. And if we just completely neglect this area of our holistic wellness, if it's so rock bottom, then in the highs and the lows, we probably don't have capacity to build this area, but that's the moment we need it the most.
Yeah, it's really hard to feel good if you have no support system or friends or community. Doesn't really matter how much you're working out.
Or you don't have the right
the right
for the moment, if you are new parents and you don't have anybody in your life, any friends that are parents, your family's not close by and you're all alone. This is a low.
Yeah.
You're at a high because you have new kids, but you're also at a low because you feel alone and you need help. This is not the moment to build said thing. And you might have friends, but maybe they don't know how to show up for you right.
Yeah.
So really trying to be mindful of building the right people for the right time and appreciating them for whatever they do bring to your life, even if they don't look like that picture perfect high school friend, because those people might fill a certain niche, but they may not be the right people for your current moment.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it's called self-care for a reason. You have to think about what your true self genuinely needs and not have any judgment towards it.
I mean, that's a line to end on. Thank you so much. I'm so freaking proud of you. And we're going to include a link to your TED Talk in the show notes because people should go watch it.
Yes. Please watch. Find me, follow me, Donuts and Down Dog, every channel.
Hi.
Yeah.
Watch for us tagging each other in our matching jackets and whatnot. But thank you so much. I love you.
Things. Love you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @itsAlexAlexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.